This is the India development debate right here on ET Now. I'm Supriya Srinath and with me is my colleague and co-anchor Sandeep Gurumurthy. The IBC has run into teething problems. The new bankruptcy code, which was supposed to work as a panacea for all the ills of the banking industry, has come unstuck thanks to a series of litigation and some quick moves by a clutch of over-smart promoters. Now, failed bidders trying to make a comeback by cutting deals outside of the IBC entities that were found ineligible in round one, looking for a backdoor entry, and a lot of loose ends in the bankruptcy law. All of that have ensured India's answer to Chapter 11 bankruptcy proceedings has remained a non-starter, to perhaps say the least.
And it's a vertical divide when it comes to India Inc. For instance, corporate honchos like Sajjan Jindal have openly come out against allowing defaulters in the IBC bidding process, while there are some others who believe that too many restrictions may work against the core theme of value maximization. Caught in the crossfire are banks that have been struggling to get their money back. Early indications are that lenders will have to take huge haircuts, and with most cases landing up in courts, it is going to be a long wait before they get some respite. The IBC hiccups and how they could come in the way of the resolution process. That's our topic of discussion tonight on the India development debate. Joining us on the show this evening, R. Gandhi, former Deputy Governor of the RBI, Shailesh Haribhakti, Chairman Haribhakti and Company LLP, Alok Dheer, CN Managing Director at Dheer & Dheer Associates, Sibi Anthony, MD and CEO Edelweiss ARC, and Maithili Bushnurmat, Consulting Editor of ET Now. Maithili, I'm going to start off with you. You know, we've seen a sort of plethora of disputes over liquidation processes under the IBC. Do you think that companies are testing the law by pushing the limits?
Well, that was bound to be so, Sandeep, because this is actually just the early stages of the law, and anybody who thought that the IBC would be some kind of a magic bullet was being very naive, because given the fact that it is a very complex law and it also changes the entire way we were addressing stressed assets, there was bound to be an amount of trouble. And given the fact that there is virtually no company, and I repeat this, virtually no company who could become eligible, particularly after the amendment to the IBC was passed, it was bound to run into all kinds of problems. So there are basically two issues that are at fault here. One, the drafting of the law itself left much to be desired, and two, the implementation. Given the court processes in this country, it was bound to run into further obstacles. So I think this is inevitable. Whether we will see a successful resolution depends. We'll have to see. It's being tested at the moment, and we'll have to keep our fingers crossed that, as I think was being said many times earlier, the collateral damage is not so much that it can completely negatives the positives of the law.
All right, fair point indeed. I'll take it across to Alok Dheer. And Alok, instead of effective resolution, the IBC seems to have become a hostage to litigation. Have the long winding processes and litigation defeated the whole purpose of IBC is really the moot question that we're discussing on the show tonight. And also the question is, what about time and the value of money?
Thanks. I think I'll agree with what Maithili has started off by saying, that it's a new law, new processes. We have an entirely new system of adjudicating authority and the hierarchy of courts which will look at it, and ultimately there are obviously the constitutional courts being the High Court and the Supreme Court. So the law is going to be tested. There are some glitches in the drafting which will obviously be laid bare and laid open, and litigants will try to move through these glitches and try to find and loopholes and try to find ground where their own interests are satisfied. Insofar as how this will affect ultimately the outcome of this legislation, it is difficult to say. Any enactment will take time to stabilize, and given that there are very peculiar issues with this, it's a financial law, but it talks in terms of the creditors' rights and the rights of all stakeholders being affected prejudicially and in some cases waived, and therefore everybody will strive to have his own rights enforced through the enactment, and it will take its time to stabilize, and we will have judicial pronouncements, and ultimately we will have legislation which is performing. At this point of time, there seems to be a big debate, and every aspect of it, whether it is procedural aspect of the legislation or the resolution plans which are coming, Section 29A has become a big point of debate And in every case, every large case that we find that most of the people are becoming ineligible, and that is bringing down the number of people which can bid for the assets and create value. Ultimately, we have to take a sort of a middle ground between, or a balance between fulfilling the interests of the creditors and the stakeholders on the one hand, and achieving the maximum value for the assets on the other hand.
Fair enough. Fair enough. So you're saying that this will take time, give it some time to stabilize, and some of these issues are going to be tested, and the judicial process will perhaps answer some of those questions as well. But, you know, Shailesh Haribhakti, the other critical issue is that of promoters coming back. And we want to sort of touch upon some of these contentious issues and debate them and get the views of this panel, really. You know, the other key issue, of course, is of promoters coming back through the back door to retain their assets. And you know, we've seen a particular case where it's obviously been more prominent. Should defaulters be allowed in the bidding process under insolvency proceedings? That's the core contentious issue, isn't it, Shailesh?
Well, that issue has now been settled, in my view, because the legislation has come out very clearly against the front or backdoor entry of promoters, and I think that is now not going to be questioned. But to my mind, I hold a very different perspective. We are seeing, particularly in the steel industry, that we are getting a much higher quality of management and far better resourced promoters coming to the fore and making bids which have reduced the haircuts, which were originally estimated to be so high, to virtually, in some cases, a full repayment. If you look at the Binani cement, for example, the entire dues of the banking system could very well be repaid. And the haircuts in steel are also trending to very, very low numbers. It is only in the other sectors which have been largely and much more impaired that the haircuts are estimated to be higher. When you take a cut through the entire pie of NPLs, which is estimated to be about 8 to 10 trillion rupees, 4 trillion rupees of NPAs will be resolved by the end of next fiscal year. And I think the democratic process through which this whole resolution seems to be happening, while there is a bit of litigation going on, I think what is going to emerge is a far stronger banking system and far stronger industries which are going to be capable of fighting international competition and make in India a better reality.
Okay, I'll come across to you, Mr. Gandhi, and you know, one of the things that was said at the start of the IBC and the stringent norms was that keeping the promoters out will push down valuations. It's going to depress the value of assets, and that's going to be counterproductive. Do you believe that argument holds ground now? Is that a valid argument today?
Not at all. I don't believe that, because the promoters did have a chance. Before that, the cases are referred to IBC. They could have come if they could have given the right price. That's the expectation, because they know that they would now know that if they do not come to the correct set of settlement with the bank, and the case can go to IBC. So that is why once they had been given a chance and they did not use it properly, then they should not be there in the bidding process. So in that process, whether it is going to be a deeper discount, that depends upon the value of the asset which the particular account has created, and the new bidders, they will value it, because there is competition. Competition will always bring out the best price. So just because the promoter is not on the scene, it is difficult to come to the conclusion that the prices will not be correct.
Okay, fair enough. Sibi, Anthony, let's get your opening comments in this debate, really. How are you viewing the progress or the lack of it in the IBC process so far? Do you believe that it's sort of stuck in a legal quagmire of sorts, and that the whole validity and the sanctity of the process is under question? Or do you believe these are teething troubles that one would expect given the magnitude of the transformation we are talking about? Which side of the camp, which side of the debate are you in?
See, this is a transformational reform that we are into now, because hitherto it was a debtor in possession sort of a, instrumentality we have been having all through the years. This is the first time ever that the creditor in control, that's why it's a transformational reform. We are in the early days of this law, and I think it's fair to give some time for it to stabilize. I know there are a number of legal issues coming up, and it was not unexpected. It was expected, in fact, because and why these largest and complex cases were referred to this NCLT under direction of the government and Reserve Bank of India. The purpose is to test the various aspects of this law. I think it's a very positive thing. It's a very healthy trend, in fact. These laws should be tested. I don't know if you remember when SURFACE was enacted, it was called unconstitutional. It was struck down. I mean, this is a law which in fact encompasses the good aspects of maybe from various geographies, and we are very positive on this. I am sure this will be a very good law. It will evolve. We are in the early days. I think hitherto maybe 500 and odd cases referred, a lot of resolutions we have seen.
Right.
And the soul of this law is resolution. Right. It's not recovery. I think
okay, so the soul of the I get your larger point there, Mr. Anthony. All right, the soul of the law is resolution and not recovery, and I think for industry and people who got the skin in the game, perhaps that's the reading. But Shailesh Haribhakti, I want to get down to the specifics and get down to some of the things that we are seeing evolve. Now, once the IBC process has started, is it correct to keep changing the goalposts? We've seen this happen in the bidding for SR Steel. They were disqualified in round 1. But both of them have become fit and proper to bid again. I mean, what sort of repercussions and what sort of implications will this have? Is it all right to change these goalposts, or do you believe this is what agile policy making is all about?
I think we need to be commercially practical, and we need to make sure that 3 objectives are simultaneously achieved. One is that the depositors' money which is at stake is returned to the banking system. We must see a control coming over the overall NPLs of the banking system, and we must see industry revive and becoming strong. And to my mind, if these objectives are kept in mind, we will see better promoters, better governance and better management coming into place through the IBC code. And I think that's a far bigger prize to look for than this temporary skirmishes that we are now seeing. And I think these will sort out and ultimately the main objective of strengthening the Indian economy and strengthening the Indian industry will be achieved. I'm extremely positive about the outcomes that I'm seeing. 49 cases are near resolution out of the 500 odd that have been put to test. 2 of the largest ones which have been resolved will result in a tremendous revival in the steel industry. And I see that as we get better and as the law becomes clearer and as precedents are set, the mindsets will change and we will see far swifter resolution in the next fiscal year.
Okay, so you're saying the approach should be to be commercially practical. That's an interesting take. Let's talk about the other contentious issue, Alok Dheer, this is to do with the fact that once the IBC process is initiated, the defaulter ceases to be the promoter of the company. Is he then within his rights to sell his so-called stake to a third party on the premise that he will pay off his creditors fully and that this is a better deal than what was devised by creditors? I mean, we've seen that happen in the case of Binani and Ultratech, which is why we're bringing it up. What is your own reading of this particular transaction that has happened between Binani and Ultratech? Is it fair, or do you believe it's going to test the sanctity of the IBC process?
Well, the IBC process clearly defines that once the CIRP starts, the directors are suspended but it does not take away the rights of the shareholders and the borrowers. Many of the promoters are personal guarantors, and they have indeed given corporate guarantees as well, and there is a right of redemption which is enshrined in the Contract Act, and a person is entitled to say that at any stage of the proceedings I am wanting to redeem my debt. The condition would be that either they pay off the debt in full or they pay the debt to the satisfaction of the parties. Now, this interplay between the right of redemption that a borrower has and the provisions of the IBC which take away the process and now run a process for the purpose of resolving the asset by inviting new bidders is something which is being tested in the Binani case. There are issues, or there are points, or there to be said on both sides in favor of what has been done by Ultratech Binani Industries, promoters with a financing partner who say that we are willing to pay 7,200 crores and we are able to discharge the debt of all secured creditors, indeed the operational creditors as well, in full. On the other hand, if we have a situation where the promoter with a financial creditor is willing to discharge all of it together, are we then going to want to sell this asset to a third party who is wanting to pay lesser money? The question here is, what is the objective? The objective is clearly that the stakeholders should get the best values that they can. At the same time, there should be a management which is capable of taking the company forward. We must realize that both in cement and steel in particular, where a lot of debate is being seen under the IBC, both these businesses, for various macroeconomic factors, and I am not saying micro, for macroeconomic factors, were in doldrums. They, for many years prior to the IBC coming into play and the commencement of the CIRP in these cases, which is somewhere in the region of about 180 to 270 days old, both the businesses have revived in a very marked manner. Therefore, it is possible that the promoters could also be reviving them. They have been in management of these companies for long periods of time, and they have faced various ups and downs in the industry. So, there is likelihood that when the industry revives, the promoter can gather the funds and ensure that the monies are paid to the creditors to their full satisfaction. And I think the jury is out. We don't know what would be the final outcome. It is quite possible. And Supreme Court in many cases under Article 142 has stepped in and has said that where settlement between creditors and borrowers is taking place and there is no loss which is being incurred by the borrower, then there is no harm in allowing the settlement to take place and the promoters to be able to retain the companies.
And I guess Supreme Court will be the right port of call to finally take that call. But Mr. Gandhi, the other question and the counter question to this whole thing is, does the option from a promoter to sell his company end the moment the bankruptcy process really kicks in? Mr. Gandhi?
Sorry, what was the question? Hello, what was the question?
Does the option from a promoter... Sir, does the option for a promoter to sell his company end the moment the bankruptcy process kicks in? Isn't that the spirit of the law?
Oh, yeah, that the courts will have to give their version, their judgment on this particular case, because the idea is that the promoters had been given full chances before the case was transferred to IBC. So, once until that time, promoter has the full rights to settle the way in whichever way all the parties agree on. If that process fails, then it is referred to IBC. Once it comes to IBC, thereafter it is a court guided proceedings which will determine the case. The promoter cannot have an independent right thereof. That is what I would think.
Oh yes, so it is in this case, it is for the top court to really resolve some of these questions. But since we are talking about the Ultratech case, Maithili, I want your thoughts as well. In the Ultratech case, for instance, the Birla Group has questioned the lack of transparency in the entire process and the arbitrary manner in which the committee of creditors picked the highest bidder. How can this process be made more watertight? I mean, a lot of other people are also saying that the process is not transparent enough. Is there a case for the IRP to give details to bidders whose bids have been rejected? I mean, what can be done to make this process more foolproof and to not make the process being tested for every every rule or every judgment? Okay, Okay, we've lost that link with Maithili, but Sybil, if I could throw, Mr. Sibi Anthony, if I could throw that question to you really, what can really be done to make the process more foolproof? In this particular case, the Birla Group has questioned the lack of transparency in the entire process and the arbitrary manner in which the highest bidder was picked. How can the process be made more watertight, Mr. Anthony?
See, in this particular case, in fact, we were actively involved in the case. I can confidently tell you that this was a very transparent process. I don't think we have left any loopholes in the process. The process was done transparently, but there could always be questions. The perfection, we need to achieve perfection in the process of running the CARP process. I think going forward, I think IBBI would need to put in some code of conduct for the RPs, maybe operating procedures to be put in. I think it will evolve. Now, I think in many cases the RPs are running different processes and all. I think it should change. You should have a uniform process in all the cases, with of course case specific issues to be tackled separately. Otherwise, overall there should be a framework within which the process should be run. I think it will evolve. It's all happening.
Okay. I'll come to you, Mr. Shailesh Haribhakti. The role of the resolution professional has also come under the scanner. And the real question is his role really limited to engaging with the highest bidder, or should he be allowed to engage himself with other bidders as well to maximize the asset value? I mean, how do you read this role evolving? Because truth be told, one believes there should be asset value maximization as well. What should the terms of engagement really be for the resolution professionals whose roles are now coming under the scanner?
I think that's an extremely vital question to answer. My personal feeling is that we have very quickly developed a core capability in the IRPs, and I must say, under very trying circumstances, they have stood up to the pressures and to the challenges rather well. Certainly, as Sibi pointed out, we need more guidelines, we need a better framework, but most important, we need to have a process to make sure that the data room, which will be accessed by all the bidders, is structured in a way that it can be readily accessed and has full information. And this is where the role of the IBBI can become extremely vital, to make sure that the data room which is accessed by all, that's where you'll start getting more transparent, fully clear bids. And all these accusations of non-transparency will be eliminated. So my feeling is that the pressure should come on the quality of information that is kept ready, and the desirability of not rushing it in a way that bids cannot come in at the right time. This approach will have to be corrected, and somewhere the line will have to be drawn. We need to start respecting time deadlines, because otherwise we can keep going on and on. As it is, the legal process will delay things. Beyond that, if we still have procedural matters, and if we don't respect the time deadlines and don't act on time, provided information is available, then we will have only ourselves to blame for not having a process that works.
Oh yes, we need to respect the time deadline, and that's something that that needs to be enforced. But Maithili, comment on that, we lost the link there. I was asking you earlier on what really needs to be done to make the process more transparent. Mr. Haribhakti there with a few suggestions, but what really do you think needs to be done to make the process more transparent, so that every person, every promoter, every bidder doesn't end up raising questions on legitimacy of the entire process?
Well, that's going to be a very tall order, Sandeep, for the simple reason that there is always going to be an element of discretion. One must understand, Mr. Haribhakti spoke about quality of governance, better management and things like that, what is commercially practical. Now, better quality of management is something that is a very subjective decision. Somebody who was running the company very well in the past, precisely because of what Alok said, is because the entire industry itself went into a downturn, was no longer able to run the company so successfully. Today, yes, it is true, cement and steel, the sectors are looking up. And so, maybe a company, a management which was in control earlier and had not been able to make a success of it, will now be able to make a success of it. So, I think the problem with the law as it stands is A, it tars all promoters with the same brush. And I think here the Parliamentary Standing Committee on Energy made a very wise suggestion. In fact, it has shown much greater wisdom than many financial experts and legal experts, because it said that the management should be changed only, and a new management should be brought in only when there is negligence has been proven. So, I think this is a very important thing. You cannot really tar everybody with the same brush, and particularly the amendment to the Act that has done enormous damage, because it says anybody who has been an NPA for more than a year. Now, you could have been an NPA for a variety of reasons, none of which have anything to do with your own competence or with your own integrity. So, I think it is very important that A, the kind of huge power, unquestioned power in the hands of the IRP. In fact, most of the IRPs, almost 100% of the IR resolution professionals have never even run a company in their life before, have never lent a penny in their life before. They are sitting in judgment on proposals and bids that are brought in by various people, and to say that the highest bidder alone should succeed is not correct, because the highest bidder may have no competence whatsoever. So, I think this is a much more nuanced position, and a lot of the problem really lies with the drafting of the law and then with the implementation of the law in the Indian context, because our courts get into all kind of issues and they have no adherence to deadlines, can never be forcefully implemented. That is really not possible given the kind of law that we are trying to implement. So, I think there are many things that we need to correct, first in the drafting, then in the implementation.
Right. You know, there is always so much written and said about the highest bidder and whether or not that should be the prime objective. Mr. Gandhi, what should be the IBC's primary objective? Value maximization or protecting the interest of all stakeholders?
See, I would believe, I would differ from what Maithili just now said, because the subjective element, qualitative assessment, these are all before the case is transferred to IBC. There is enough time to apply all those kind of criteria before the things comes to a position, a point that it should be referred to IBC. Once it has been referred to IBC, law takes over. When the law takes over, there cannot be any discretion among any one of the parties involved. They have to go by the book of the law, the letter of the law. Spirit they may keep in mind, but in the legal process always letter is important. So, that is why the highest bidder, that is what is required, because value maximization, once the process has failed, that out of court process has failed, then court ordained process will have to maximize value. So, for maximizing value, whoever has given the best price, the high one, H1, that is what should be the RP should be dealing with. So, RP cannot be given any discretion based on his own qualitative assessment of either the management capability. Then definitely there will be any number of cases, any number of parties can question his wisdom. So, that is why that is not warranted. That process, again I repeat, that had its own time, and people did not make good use of that time. Then one has to go through the legal process only.
Okay, Alok, comment on that. This is a fascinating debate there, really. Maithili pointing out why it can't just be driven by this objective of, the maximum bid, and that there is an element of subjectivity involved, and the resolution professional not always and not necessarily has the competence to take a subjective call on the quality of a bid, like we've seen in some of those cases. Alok, which side of the debate are you in? Do you believe that the objective needs to be revenue maximization, so give it to the highest bidder no matter who? Or do you think that we need to make this a little more watertight to ensure subjectivity is eliminated from the hands of the resolution professional? Alok.
I think there are many competing thoughts with respect to what should be the objective of this enactment, and none of them is subservient to the other. The maximization of the value is a very core objective, but at the same time, ensuring that the industry survives in this country, the entrepreneurs in the country are encouraged to enter and take up new businesses and develop new businesses is also important, and the interests of all stakeholders, whether it is workmen or it is operational creditors, have to be kept in mind. So there's a whole set of objectives and goals which need to be achieved. One aspect I would like to point out, Mr. Gandhi has talked in terms of enough time being available before the cases are processed or taken into the IBC. We must remember that under the IBC, the touch point for taking a case into the CIRP process is a single default. There is no time element involved. If a company's cash flow has suffered at a point of time where a single default has occurred with respect to an operational creditor or a financial creditor of an amount of 1 lakh rupees, when we are talking into cases where 45,000 crores and odd, 50,000 crores are values and credit stuck in, for a very small default, the process can start. To then say that because the process has started, enough time was given to the entity or to the promoters to have revived itself is not a very reasonable approach to take. Insofar as the resolution professional is concerned, the resolution professional is only a master of ceremonies. He does not have any real power to decide one way or the other. His power is to ensure that during the period of the CIRP, the company is run in a reasonable manner and keep it as a going concern as far as possible. He is not alone. The management of the company, including the managing director who happens to be an employee of the company, is there to support him. The problem seems to be that many resolution professionals today are taking a position of not being cooperative or not expecting or believing that there will be cooperation given to them from the management, but trying to put themselves into a position which is at cross purposes with the management. And that is going to result in, one, the operations of the company suffering; second, lack of understanding the roles between parties, clash of interest between parties, and not accepting the fact that the existing promoters are not necessarily at cross purposes. What is required here is, as in other parts of the world, because this process of keeping the non-performing promoters, willful defaulters, or n number of disqualifications which have been put in the enactment under 29A is not prevalent in other parts of the world at all. The promoters of the company, the sponsors of the company are entitled to participate in the resolution processes in every other part of the world.
Right.
We are unique in this regard that we seem to have picked up and said that anybody who was part of the NPA process for more than a year, in which case Mr. Gandhi is right, a year is a long time.
Yeah.
Or has been even disqualified,
Right.
related parties issues, relative issues, connected parties issues, and as Maithili started by saying that just about everybody, every corporate entity in this country can be dragged into a case of saying that you are ineligible under 29A, has not done great service to the implementation of the IBC. I think we should have been somewhat more open-minded.
Yeah,
we should have allowed the best promoters to come in, bring greatest value.
Right.
I'm sorry.
Right. Mr. Dheer, I think why I'll interfere there is because I think that decision has been made. And I think that decision, no, I'm saying, you know, I'll interfere there because I think the decision has been made, and I think the government of the day has decided that rules need to change, and this is perhaps being done to clean up the political economy part of this. And, you know, this can't be changed right now, so we're not going to discuss that. But your point well taken on, you know, the involvement of the resolution professionals and management.
I'm sorry,
there.
I must point out.
To you, Mr. Anthony.
No, I want to point out one thing here, that as you are aware, a committee has been established and 29A is being reviewed very meaningfully now.
So let's see how that goes, and which is why I think let's restrict the debate to another day. But yes, maybe not get in the promoters, maybe get in the guarantors and the promoter class shareholders. There is what we are given to understand. But to you, Mr. Anthony, do you think IBC should be a one-bid process, or should it encourage a bidding war? In the second case, the value maximization obviously gets a boost, but it also encourages suboptimal bids in the first round. Now, which side of this debate are you on? Should it be a one-bid process, or should it actually boost a bidding war and get the maximum value possible?
See, the
Antony.
core of the process is value maximization, and at the same time fairness to all the stakeholders. We as a large stakeholder by way of lending, I think value maximization is what we look at, but at the same time, we are very keen that all the stakeholders, maybe operational creditors, maybe statutory liabilities, all these issues are addressed properly. That is very important. Then only the law also will get its its respect, its importance in the system. So we are very keen. Actually, we should work towards that. If you look at the evaluation criteria, if you getting evolved, I think there is a marking system. There is a marking system which gives weightage to the value. There is a weightage for the turnaround capability and the operational matters. I think with all these, the marking system is, again, we are in the early days. It is getting evolved. I am sure it will, even the present system, it works okay. I mean, there may be scope for the further improvement, but at the same time, these 70 marks towards, value and 30 marks towards operational capability and turnaround management, I think it's okay. As of now, the cases what we have done is based on this, and the H1 is selected in that manner. And that perhaps that's the only way we can do at present. There could be some element of subjectivity in all this, but that I don't think we can avoid all the subjectivity in such matters.
Okay, fair enough. Shailesh Haribhakti, quick point to you, and then you take a very short break. Shailesh Haribhakti, what about the huge haircuts that banks are forced to take in some of the cases? We've spoken about the cases where there's been no haircut, but there have been several cases where banks have been forced to take a huge haircut. Will this strengthen the case for a multi-round bidding? Is that something that you would sort of support?
No, I would support quick resolution. I would support a very robust and rigorous process of evaluating all options before something is brought into the IBC, and after that I would like the time dimension to be the overwhelming factor. I think we need to address these issues swiftly and move on, because what will happen is if we allow these wounds to fester, my experience over the last 30 years tells me that the more time you take to resolve an issue, the worse the final outcome is. And I think the way the law has evolved and the way the whole process has evolved, the haircuts that we had imagined are going to come down quite dramatically, simply because the process seems to be working. We are getting H1 at levels that were not even expected. So I think we should allow the process, we should allow the time dimension, and we should allow the way that it has been structured to play itself out. We've got 33 cases only that we are going to be looking at in the first big round. And I think the outcomes in these are going to be pointers to how we can further evolve in a democratic way this law to make it more facile, better implemented.
Absolutely, and we'll come back and discuss the fine-tuning of this law to make it better suited for India. We will also come back and discuss whether an amiable solution is possible once this is admitted, and should a review happen on that front. This has been a fascinating debate on something that is going to set the next course of action as far as Indian industry is concerned and for the Indian economy. We'll be back in a moment right here on the India Development Debate.
Back with ET now, you're with the India Development Debate, and let's get closing comments from all our panelists. Mr. Gandhi, the Act as it stands right now has no provision for an amicable settlement once a case has been admitted. Do you believe there's a case for that to be reviewed? Because now it's going to be tested by the Supreme Court, in the Supreme Court, but do you believe that there's a case for that to be reviewed?
So I understand that already the High Court has given a kind of suggestion to the parties, whether any out of court settlement you people are able to arrive at and come back on that. Even though it is not an order, it is we are giving a suggestion to you. That would mean that legally that kind of solution is also within the realm of the law. That is what it looks like. So, anyway, finally, the courts or the law may be suitably amended to make that effect, but if the right precedents are set by the judicial system, that will be followed in the law. So, I would think that just because the process has started on, that will not be any out of the court settlement, that may not necessarily be the case.
Okay, may not necessarily be the case, no out of court settlement may be possible, but Alokdhir, what's your view on this? The Act of course has no provision for an amicable settlement once a case has been admitted so far, but is there a case, is there a case to create room you know, and give it a chance?
In fact, indeed, I do believe so. The Supreme Court has, in many cases till date, has appreciated that there is this gap in the law, and they have stepped in to do complete justice to parties, and in some of these cases they have allowed the cases to be withdrawn. And in fact, in one of the cases, the Supreme Court has itself in its judgment recorded the fact that an amendment may be made to create an environment or circumstances in which cases can be withdrawn if amicable solutions are found. And indeed, I do believe that if the lenders are going to be paid their dues in cash without any deferment over a period of time, and there is no sacrifice that the lender is going to suffer on account of the withdrawal of the case from the CIRP process, there seems to be no reason to push a company into CIRP and liquidation and enforce a write down when the promoter is willing to pay the complete dues of all the creditors. So there is a gap. It has been noticed by the Supreme Court, directions have been issued, or at least it has been suggested to the government that they relook at this. So I have every reason to believe
Maithili,
that
on a different note, let's
to be
look at it from the
incorporated
prism
in
of banks. I know we've looked at it primarily from Sure. Maithili, if I could bring you in on a slightly different note, do you think, you know, we've looked at it from the prism of promoters, we've looked at it from the prism of government, but if you look at it from the prism of banks, do you think banks have been left a little clueless in this entire process? I mean, are they doing enough to recover their dues and reduce their losses? How would you look at this entire process from the point of view of banks?
I think the problem really, Sandeep, it is true what you say, that the banks have very often been left watching quite helplessly. And in fact, given the fact, particularly in the case of public sector banks, that you have the three terrible C's, the CAG, the CVC, the CBI, etc., breathing down their necks, many public sector bankers now would prefer all the cases to go through the IBC procedure rather than make any kind of, you know, compromises with the promoters, or in the case of restructuring, they'd rather not have anything to do with restructuring, just in case questions are asked. And I think it's also very important at this juncture to point out that the problem really lies with the preamble of the Act. The Act is trying to do many things at the same time, because it's not just addressing the issue of NPA resolution and seeing that secured creditors, financial creditors concerns are addressed, because there's a critical clause which says apart from maximizing value, it has to balance the interests of all stakeholders. Now, what does balance mean? As we've seen in the case of real estate companies, home buyers, people who have given money to the company and then the company has not delivered to the potential buyers, the courts have intervened saying that their interest must also come to the front. Now, how are you going to balance their interest with that of the secured creditors who have assets which have been mortgaged, hypothecated, whatever collateral assets have been collateralized to them? So, there are these issues. So, I think the problem, as I said repeatedly say, lies in the way the Act has been formulated, the way it has been drafted, and given the kind of inconsistencies that are there, which have been made worse with the amendment, I think in the process it is the banks who are ultimately going to be holding the baby, and as taxpayers we will end up, you know, as I said, paying for the sins of the misdrafting, bad implementation, and a whole host of other problems that come with such an Act.
Seems All right, fair point indeed. But Shailesh Haribhakti, coming on the point that somebody like a Sajjan Jindal makes out there. So obviously he was outbid by the Tatas as far as Bhushan was concerned, but he's crying foul on SR Steel and he says he wasn't allowed to bid. And then he goes on to say it seems as if SR Steel's creditors did not want more money and told us we cannot participate. I mean, those were his exact words. Is this someone who's talking because he lost out in the bidding process, or do you believe there is merit in that argument?
Well, I think the ultimate answer will be given by NCLT in terms of whether the bid by Mr. Jindal for SR Steel will be permitted or not. And so I would not like to give NCLT's judgment in advance. And I think everybody is trying to make a point based on what they think their capability is. But let me just come in for a minute on the resolution aspect from the bank's point of view. I believe that if we can move ourselves to 31st of March 2019, we will see a very dramatic reduction in the net NPAs of the banking system, particularly the banking system, if these 32 cases which are right now being sought to be resolved are resolved. In fact, it will come down to manageable proportions. There will be a few banks which will be out of line, but by and large that will improve, and the book value improvement as a result of these resolutions in the banking system will be significant, save and except the extreme outliers who have got a much larger problem. So I can see that the positive effect of this first big round is going to be so significant that the remaining 400 which will be left in the system will have excellent precedents to look forward to. And my belief is that we will be able to quickly reach a situation where, based on market-driven forces, we'll be able to bring about a change of mindsets, a better adherence to credit discipline, and a far different way of operating in India, which will give a far stronger base for us to operate in. That is what I believe will be the outcome of the next 1.5 years of resolution.
Oh yes, that's, you summed it up very aptly there. Sivi, Anthony, quick comment from you. You know, and I think the panel here agrees that there are teething problems, but I think there's consensus that there is a case for fine-tuning a lot of provisions in the IBC. You know, and that there are these loose ends that need to be tied up because there are a lot of things that are still subject to interpretation. Specifically, what is the one or two things that you think need to be tied up now as far as the process is concerned?
I think the November, the amendment brought in November, that was slightly harsh according to me, because banks have hundreds of assets to be resolved. These first 12 and then for 28 cases, 40 cases, we may get good bids from competitors, very good competitive bidding. But I always feel the value of an asset is the robustness of the underlying business. Steel sector or cement, you will get good bids, but there are hundreds of smaller cases which would need to be resolved, but I doubt whether you will get good bidders there. That's where the challenge for the bankers will remain. I personally would think that you need to tweak the 29A slightly, and blanket ban on promoters, I think we should have a revisit on that.
Okay, we have to revisit the blanket ban on promoters, and Alokdir, your quick thoughts on this? Does the blanket ban need to go, and will that indice more interest?
Yeah, in my mind, I mean, slightly larger issue the system in the country insofar as the insolvency is concerned was completely broken, and we really needed a new system. And I'm very happy that IBC has come in, and it has come in with the concept of a creditor in possession versus a debtor in possession. And it was necessary to make sure that the creditors have rights and authority to resolve the asset. But insofar as the entire system is concerned, all the stakeholders need to come with an open mind, with trust and faith in each other and in the system, and permit anybody to come forward to make a resolution plan which is in the interest of the stakeholders, and particularly the creditors and the bankers. Restricting it under section 29A is not the best thing to have happened. It is unique in India that we are asking some people not to participate. I would also like to say that almost 50% of the NPA in the country was covered in the first batch of 12 cases, which was 25% of the NPA. The next batch of 28 cases also covered another 25% of the NPA. So 50% of the NPA is covered in these cases. In my mind, these test cases will generate jurisprudence, will generate case laws, which will ensure that over the next years, we will be able to have a stable system. And if the stable system is able to deliver value to the stakeholders and benefit the industry as a whole, and keep the motto of keeping the ease of doing business, and encourage entrepreneurs to come in and set up companies, encourage creditors to lend money with less fear in their mind of having lost money in case of distress, and knowing that there is a robust mechanism to recover money, it would work very well for the country in the long run.
Right. Okay. That's the view of the panel. Really, I think IBC is work in progress, and some specific provisions need to be looked into. The contentious one on promoter is something that is obviously hotly debated, and that's something that the government will take a call on at the right time. There are other key clauses as well. Some of them the government will resolve, and some of them, I'm afraid, will have to be resolved only by the top court of the land. But can't thank this panel enough for having this wonderful conversation and bringing to light some of the key contentious issues on the Insolvency Bankruptcy Code that need to be reviewed. The good news is that they're saying all is well. These are routine problems, teething problems that will eventually get fixed.
Thanks very much for being with us.